So you want to knit, but you have no idea where to start. You don't even know what to search for. And trust me, I get it. A year ago, I was exactly where you are at now. As my professor in university would like to put it, I was in a state of unconscious incompetence. I didn't know what I didn't know. And yet, 700 hours and 20 garments later, I feel like I finally gained the courage to knit anything that I want. And I want to help you get there too. That's why I came up with this 3-part video series titled Pre-Knitting, Peri-Knitting, and Post-Knitting, which condenses everything you need to know to start your knitting journey. Hello and welcome to the last video of the series, Post-Knitting. So you have finished your first garment, you're done, you're ecstatic, but you're not exactly done just yet. There is still a couple more steps to do before you're truly done with this garment. The first thing is weaving in ends, and for this you'll need a tapestry needle. I will show you guys once again on a table. This is assuming you have a plain stockinette kind of body of work. Of course, if you're doing something with ribbing or something different, then you might have to weave it in a little bit differently, but for the most part, if you're doing a beginner garment, it is most likely just stockinette. And this is the primary way I weave in my ends. So basically what you're gonna do is take a tapestry needle or any needle really that allows the yarn to fit through. So I learned this method from another YouTube video that I watched on here. If I can find it, I will link it down below. I should describe the little bumps on the wrong side of the stockinette stitch as rainbows and smiley faces, and I think that really helps me to visualize what she's talking about. Another way to describe them could be also as the letter N or the letter U. Basically what you want to do is to be weaving your ends in through these bumps. At my first entry point, you can see that I am inserting my needle into the adjacent U-shaped bump. So I'm going in. You can see that the blue forms a really nice N-shaped bump, which lines up really nicely behind the N-shaped bump on the red color yarn. You want to go in a pair, so if you're inserting your needle into the U-shaped bump, the next bump that you want to enter your needle into is the N-shaped bump. So go into the U and then into the N on the left hand side and then pull it all the way through. You don't want to pull it too taut. So you always want to pull the swatch a little bit to kind of loosen up the yarn. After you've done the N shaped, you want to go into another N shape followed by a U shape on the left hand side, and then you go back around into a U shaped bump and then going back to the N shaped that you did before in the previous stitch. So you always want to create this sort of duplicate stitch, as you can see by all the little bumps that are being formed by the blue yarn, so that it wouldn't be visible on the right hand side. I'm just repeating this throughout for around an inch or two. The most important thing is to always make sure that you're going in pairs, so if you do an N-shaped bump, the next one has to be a U-shaped bump. So basically the order in which I did it was U, N, N, U, U, N, and U. So that's how you kind of weave in your ends in that sequence. And also another thing is that when you are weaving your needle in, your first stitch will be into a fresh stitch that the blue yarn has not been woven into yet. And the second stitch has to be from the previous stitch that you wove your blue yarn through the previous round. It is a little bit difficult to explain, but I'm just showing it repeatedly over here on the swatch as slowly as possible. You can feel free to keep rewinding this part as well to get a clearer idea. And then once I find that I'm okay with the length, I am just going to cut it. And now I'm going to show you how it looks like on the right hand side. So the right hand side, you can see that it is almost invisible. I am using a contrasting color, and so the fact that you can barely see it on the right hand side just goes to show that this method is really great. Okay, so that is how you weave in your ends. In general, I find this method so helpful because from the front it is super invisible. You can barely tell that it is there. Once again, I'm just showing you an example. This is me weaving in a couple of ends over here. You can see that it is definitely much thicker over here, but on the flip side, it is pretty invisible. You can't see it at all. It is this portion over here, by the way. But yeah, you can't tell it. And maybe some other examples. This area over here is where I weaved in my ends. And this is the flip side. So this point over here. In general, I find that there are other ways to weave in ends, and I've tried those ways as well. For example, doing it in a diagonal across one area and then weaving it the opposite direction, which is a little bit more how I used to weave in my ends in crochet. And in crochet, because the stitches are bigger and thicker, I find that it hides the extra tail much better. But for knitting, because the garment is pretty thin in a sense that the stitches are smaller and kind of thinner in a way, it kind of shows off the tail a little bit more. And when I used to do that, if I were to hold the garment up, you can actually see the line going through, like the shadow of the line behind. So I don't like to do that method, and instead I use this method, which works so well. You can also tell that after I weaved in ends, I actually did cut off but this much, but I left this much behind. I didn't cut it right down to the edge, like right close to the stitch. And the reason being ties in really nicely with blocking. So sometimes in blocking a garment, your garment may, depending on what fiber you're using, it may stretch out, it may grow. And in doing so, it kind of pulls on the tail as well. And so I want to give a little bit of allowance in the event that the tail is getting pulled. At least it wouldn't cause some parts of the weaving in of the tail to come loose. And so that's why I usually cut off my tail, but I leave a little bit behind, maybe a centimeter around there or 2 centimeters. So I think that works really well, and it doesn't really interfere with me wearing my clothing or my garment at all. So I just like leaving a little bit of a tail behind. And so the next thing that I want to talk about, which is super essential in your knitting garment journey, is blocking. And I personally really love blocking, especially when it comes to things like linen. The results from before and after blocking is incredible. So what is blocking exactly? I just googled the definition. Blocking is a finishing process for knitted items that involves getting the fabric wet, reshaping it, and letting it dry flat. So that is essentially what blocking is. I will go through the whole process for blocking with you guys later, but in general, I really do love blocking because it helps the stitches to get super even and super neat and nice and just chef's kiss beautiful. It just helps to make your garment look better. And if you're doing cables or lace work, it helps the cables and the lace work to just open up and become really beautiful. Because if you're doing it while just knitting and you just wear it like that, they're usually really scrunched up and tight. So you want to do some blocking to get them to open up and to bloom beautifully. And also another thing is that blocking helps to get your final measurements down. So what I mean by that is, especially I find in wool garments, in knitting sweaters, before and after blocking, it is a night and day difference, especially when it comes to wool. After you've blocked them, immediately the sleeves and everything grow so much. And that also depends on if you're a tighter or looser knitter. But in general, after knitting, it does kind of grow a bit, and that helps you to kind of get your final measurements fixed. So how to block? Basically, what you want to do is to soak your knits gently in water. And by the way, when going through this process, I'm talking about natural fibers. So for natural fibers, be it wool or plant-based fibers like linen, cotton, you want to soak them gently. I have a little bucket that I really love. Alternatively, what you can do is you can put it in a sink or a pail or a pot, like anything that can collect water really. For the longest time, I was just using my sink until I realized that that wasn't so feasible because I'm using a lot of water because my sink is kind of big. And so I decided to buy this little plastic laundry bin from Amazon, which I really love. And so I'll link that down below for you guys if you want to get that as well. So what I do is just get some water, I'll put the garments into the bucket, and I put some soap in as well. So there's some specific soap that you guys can get. This is the Eucalyptus lavender scent that I used for my knits, and the main thing that I've been using for the entire year of me knitting, and this is how it looks like. This comes in a bottle of 500 milliliters, and I've been using it non-stop the entire year, so you can see that it's only halfway through. So I do think a little bit goes a long way, and it really smells so good, and it is a pretty affordable price if I remember correctly. The other option that I have just received, and I have used it I think once. I love how strong the smell is. Like, it really lasts on my clothes. It smells so good. And this is the wool wash from Sorella Yarn, and the scent is Home. I believe this is the scent. Where is it? Over here. So this comes in 4 ounces. I am not sure how much that is in milliliters, but this is how it looks like. This is really nice as well. In general, I would recommend not using just any soap because you don't want it to get too harsh on your fabric. You know, you spend so much time on your knitted garments, you don't want the soap that you use to ruin them because it can cause your garments to actually break down. I do believe some people do use baby shampoo as well, so that is another option if you guys want to use that. Another thing is that these 2 wool washes contain lanolin, which is a waxy natural substance secreted by sheep's sebaceous glands to protect their wool and skin from weather. Usually if a soap contains lanolin, it is made more for wool knits. So these 2 come with lanolin and they are therefore more suited for woolly knits, to be honest, even though I just use them for all of my knits. Reason being is because lanolin actually helps to make the wool a little bit more insulating. It helps with the durability of the wool, prevents the wool from felting, but because it makes it more insulating, you might not want to use it for your summer knits. But with that being said, I have yet to find a good substitute for my summer knits, and also I don't find that this really makes my summer knits all that warm to wear either, so I just go ahead and use them anyway. How you block your animal-based versus plant-based fibers. For both, I just use room temperature water. I fill the basin with maybe half of it in water, put my garment in. For wool knits, especially non-superwash wool, you want to be super gentle. Even my knitting for olive cotton merino knits, I am super cautious with. The moment it gets wet, I try not to agitate it too much. I just put it in and I just leave it. I don't move it around or anything like that. Even when I take it out afterwards, I'm not wringing it out like that, but I just squeeze it gently out. The reason why is because when wool gets wet, it is super vulnerable and it is more prone to pilling and felting. So if you were to rub your knits together like that, the wool fibers will end up sticking together, and that is totally not what you want after spending so long on a wool knit. So please don't do that. However, if you're going to knit with linen, this is a cotton linen viscose blend or 100% cotton, this one over here. What I do is I put those in a basin and I actually agitate them quite a bit. So I'm like moving them around, rubbing them against each other, especially when it comes to linen, because I want the fibers to soften up. So that is how I treat my plant-based knits instead of my animal-based knits. And I find that it works both ways pretty well. After you take them out, of course, both are treated the same way from here on out. So I just give them a good gentle squeeze, put them on a blocking mat if it is my first time blocking them, and I just put them on a blocking mat, lay them out, and pin them into the measurements that I want them to be at. Normally, if I'm following a pattern, the pattern designer usually gives finished dimensions of the garment. So I just follow those dimensions in pinning my garment in place. So for example, if my length is meant to be 50 centimeters, I just pin it down, measure to make sure that the length from the back all the way to the hem is 50 centimeters. If the bust width is meant to be like 40 or 50 centimeters, I just measure it as well, make sure that it is all good, and then I just leave it in place. If not, I'll make some small tweaks here and there to just readjust and repin them into place. So that's how I do that. I would recommend a measuring tape for that, of course. So for blocking mats, I did get blocking mats from Amazon. I wouldn't really say that there is a very urgent need for blocking mats for the first few months. I was using a random flat cushion to block my knits into place. Even currently, I still use the cushion from time to time because it is much bigger than my blocking mats, so I just tend to use them sometimes still. So there is really no need to buy blocking mats, and in fact, you can get away with buying those, tiny mats that are meant for babies. If I can find a picture, I'll just put it here so that you guys know what I'm talking about. But you can just use that instead. It works the exact same way. The good thing about having blocking mats though is that they have these lines on the blocking mats which are kind of grid lines, and then because of that you can kind of line up your garment a little bit better. Other than that, you really don't have to get these. I only got this because I realized that I really like knitting and I really wanted to get into it. But otherwise, if you're just starting out, anything really works. Another thing you need is some pins to pin your garments into place. So I just use these knit blockers, which I think I'll recommend more than the blocking mats. So if you had to buy one thing, I'll recommend this one more because I find this quite helpful indeed. So this is how it looks like. I use it for every single one of my blocking, and it comes in 2 different kinds. So Okay, that's one that's this, which is smaller, thinner, and then that's one that's a little bit fatter, so this one over here. So you can see the difference. This one is bigger, so it's more for like the length and the hem of stuff, and then this is for more curved edges. So like for example, this portion over here, it would be good to use this to pin the sides. So that's how I use it. But otherwise, when I first started knitting, I used safety pins, so just something like that. I just bought these and they are so much cheaper. However, after a while of using them, I do believe they started to rust a little bit. I think because it is so cheap, and also because it is quite tedious to have to pin it one by one versus this, which has like 6 or 7 pins in one go, so it's much faster. And so that's why I decided to use these knit blockers instead. But otherwise, function-wise, they work exactly the same. Back to the actual blocking process, because I realize I'm jumping here and there. Now that you've gotten all your equipment for blocking, you want to actually soak your knits for around 30 minutes to 1 hour. For me, I just soak them for a bit longer, for 1 hour, just to make sure that the yarn is really fully absorbing all of the water and fully relaxing in the water. And after I'm done with that, I'll just take it out and just lay it out flat and pin them in place and wait at least a couple of days at least before I take out my garment. I need the garment to be bone dry, not just cool to the touch. It has to be super dry before I take it out, because I don't want to move it or agitate it while it is even slightly wet. I don't really use acrylic yarn. I used it more for when I was crocheting, and when I was using acrylic yarn for crochet and I wet blocked them, there was not much difference, and I since realized that you're supposed to steam block acrylic yarn. With that being said, don't over steam it because you don't want to burn your fibers, given that it is plastic after all. But yeah, you're supposed to steam block your acrylic garments. So now that you're done with blocking your knits, you're wearing them, you're enjoying them, there'll come a time when you have to wash them again, and I would recommend just doing the same thing, just putting the basin of water with some of this wool wash in, and you can just dry it, wring it, but you don't have to pin it down anymore. However, I would still recommend drying it flat. You never ever want to hang your knits to let them dry, because knits are prone to stretching out, especially when they are wet. They will stretch out like no other, so you really want it to dry flat. And so I bought this drying rack, and I find that it is super helpful. For the longest time, whenever I wash my garments, I just let it dry flat on the cushion, and I didn't really want that to happen because it would have this musky kind of smell. And so I bought this drying rack, and it dries so fast, and I think that it is super helpful, and I would totally recommend getting this drying rack as well. I have one, but I do want to buy a couple more because I believe you can stack them vertically and then you can dry multiple pieces at the same time, because I do like to wash multiple knitted garments at the same time so as to save water and save soap. So that is how I rewash my garments. Otherwise, in terms of storage, so far I have not come up with a long-term storage plan. But as you can see, I always fold my garments and just rest them flat. I at no point ever hang my garments up. So for storage of yarn, maybe some excess yarn or yarn that you have in stash waiting to be used for a project, there are different ways that I store them. The first way that I store them is in this bag. I forgot what these kind of bags are called. If I remember the name, I'll put it up here. But these bags I got from Wool Warehouse, and I think that they are super helpful because it just really helps to keep all my yarn nice and neat instead of just all over the place. It just looks clean. However, one thing to take note of is that you don't want to, if you're living especially in a really hot and humid place, which is where I'm living in, you don't want to leave your yarn open to conditions in which they can get eaten by moth larvae. I did find some moth like eggs or larvae growing on the wall near my yarn, so what I did instead was I don't think they went into my yarn. I did switch them to being kept in Ziploc bags instead because they are airlocked, airtight. The moths can't get to it like that. So if you're worried about that happening, then I would recommend to keep your yarn in Ziploc bags as well and just keep them really nice and protected like that. If you ever find that your yarn is getting ravaged by moth larvae, what I did was keep my yarn in plastic Ziploc bags and put them in the freezer. I left it in there for at least 3 days. After you're done with that, that just essentially kind of kills any moth larva that is growing inside your yarn. After the 3 days, you just take it out, let it thaw. Don't open the bag, just let it thaw. And after it's fully at normal room temperature, that's when you can use your yarn again. So that's how you fix the problem if there's ever a moth situation. Thank God I don't think the moths actually went to my yarn, but because I saw the larva growing nearby, I just decided to be safe and just put all my yarn in the freezer. So that is that. One last thing I want to talk about is some resources for you guys as well. So given that this is the last video in this 3-part video series, this is by no means an exhaustive list for all you need to know to be knitting. Of course, there are so many more things that you should know and you will need to know as you continue your knitting journey and move on to become an advanced beginner and intermediate knitter. So I just want to redirect you guys to some really helpful resources that I believe will be able to help you guys along with your knitting journey as you move on. So the first thing is obviously my Knitting 101 playlist. I did put in the videos that I think will be really helpful for you guys to know a bit more about different kind of knitting information and techniques that you need to know. So some YouTubers that I want to redirect you guys as well is Nimble Needles. He is my #1 knitting YouTuber that I go to when I need to know a new technique. I find that he is so helpful. He is very succinct in his explanations and he shows the techniques really clearly as well. And I would recommend going to his channel when looking for certain information because he has been doing this for such a long time. He has definitely much more videos than I have in terms of knitting tutorials, so I would definitely recommend checking his video out. And some other YouTubers that I want to redirect you guys to as well is Kika as well as Handmade by Florence. I do find that the two of them do have quite a lot of knitting tutorials as well. Specifically what they do is, especially Kika, she releases patterns and then she releases knitting tutorials based on those paid patterns. So you have to buy the pattern and then you just follow along in her knitting tutorials. She especially has knitting tutorials for even her cabled sweaters. So if cables or lace is something that you're into, that would recommend maybe checking her patterns out because she does have video instructions on how to do those cables and stuff. So if you're daunted by doing more complex designs, then maybe that is a good place to start. One book that I want to direct your attention towards as well is Patty Lyon's book of Knitting Bag of Tricks. I did buy this book and I have it on my Kindle and I do think that it is such a beautifully written book. It is really smart. She goes in depth into the anatomy of stitches, why certain things are done, which I feel like for me as a knitter and a person who is usually pretty curious about how things work. I don't just like to do things, I want to know why I'm doing certain things. That is the book for you because she tells you exactly why you need to go about doing certain things. And she also goes really in-depth into like the hows and whys of things and the concept of things, which I think will really help you grow as a knitter as well when you're not blindly following instructions but really knowing why those instructions are made. With that, that is all I have for this video. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. I hope that it was informational for you guys and I'll see you guys in my next video. Do let me know if there's anything that you need me to clarify or add down below, or if there's any other videos that you'd like to see from me as well. Let me know down below and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!